Hi there. Welcome to another episode of the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. I have a special guest with me. He's back. He is our mystery guest from a few months ago, and his name is actually Tyler, and he is studying at the University of Kentucky. He is studying pharmaceutical sciences, doing his PhD there, and he's really come up with a very interesting concept that guess what? The DNA may hold the key to the number 666. Hey, Tyler, it's good to have you back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is really great. I'm so glad that you could join us again. So now, we talked about this several months ago, and, I was really excited. I got your email, and you were like, hey, I think there could be something to this. It was pretty awesome, and it was a really fun show. And I know that we're gonna, just talk about that and more things, but kind of, get us back up to speed on like what's up this. I mean, obviously, I as a theologian, as a Bible researcher, I've made some predictions about that, but now you're coming at it from a very different point of view. You think that the number 666 may be in the base pair, represented in the molecular weight of the base pair of DNA. Is that correct?
It's actually the molecular weight of a base pair of DNA and RNA. So there are four basic building blocks to DNA and four similar basic building blocks to RNA. And you can just think of them as four different letters: C, T, G, and A. In the case of DNA, and in the case of RNA, C, U, G, and A. And each one of those building blocks weigh a certain amount, and that is represented. Those units are in grams per mole, or atomic mass units. And if you take the four basic building blocks of DNA and you sum their masses, and then you take the four basic building blocks of RNA and sum those masses, and just sum all of them together and then divide by 4, right? Because it takes 2 to make a base pair. So there's 4 base pairs possible here. If you just take the 4 basic building blocks of RNA and DNA, it's actually equals 666. So that's the average molecular weight of a base pair of RNA and DNA.
Wow, that's really amazing. So again, the average molecular weight of DNA and RNA together is 666 grams per mole. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. All right. So now, is that a significant number? I mean, obviously the 666, but I mean, what were your thoughts as a researcher when you kind of came to this discovery? What was going through your mind?
Although the way I came across this discovery is I was just watching one of your lectures uh, about your book, Corrupting the Image, and your theories behind how Satan has and his fallen angels together have come down and, mated with humans and produced these hybrid creatures, these angel human hybrid creatures. And that's why God flooded the earth to begin with. And there was a point in your lecture, where you talked about where it says in the Bible that in those days, actually Jesus said it, in those days it'd be like the days of Noah. And so to me, that means like, okay, this is going to happen again, because if God flooded the earth to get rid of these hybrid creatures, then if that's going to happen again, okay, well then somehow our DNA is going to become corrupted again, right? So then that got me thinking about the number 666. I never had a good explanation from anyone on that number. And I know there are many proponents of gematria. You can add up the numbers, and you can correlate numbers with letters in the alphabet and get 666 for different people's names, or perhaps even famous, ancient Greek gods, like Apollo, for instance. I know that's a popular one. Like Apollyon can be 666 in gematria. But to me, it's just not concrete enough. And as a scientist, I wanted something more concrete. And I believe that if God was going to put, this into his book, that it had to be something concrete, universal, and everlasting. And what's more concrete, universal, and everlasting than than the laws of physics and chemistry and science. I mean, the elements don't change, their weights don't change no matter what throughout time, and neither do those four basic building blocks that I told you about of DNA and RNA. Uh, and so I was reading Revelation 13, and it says that the second beast had power to give life and breath to to the image of the first beast. And when I saw image, that word image to me, it's almost like copy. So it, like, you can copy someone's DNA, you can make an image of someone's DNA. So if this beast had the power to give life and breath to the image of the first beast, then and it says, and then also I was reading especially into verse 18 of chapter 13 in Revelation, and it says that his number is 666, and it says that to calculate the number, and that it's, in most translations it'll say the number of a man, but in some translations it says the number of man, or the number of humanity. And
Right.
so then once I saw that, I was like, okay, well, it's not the number of a man. It could actually be the number of man, or the number of humanity. So I was like, wow, okay.
Uh,
Um,
I pulled it up on the screen, and I just want to confirm that it says eton arithmon tu onomos avtu. So actually, I got the wrong verse there. My bad. Sorry. Let me just scroll down, see if I can't get that. Okay, and okay, there we go. So it says, yeah, for the number of a man. Now the word, the letter, or the a, the indefinite article, is there because it can go either way. So it's indefinite. That's the point. All right. So and so it says arithmos gar anthropou. So again, there's no definite article. It could be, it is the number of man or the number of a man. It could go either way. So what you're saying is correct. I just want to kind of back you up on that. But please go on.
yeah, thanks. So once I understood that, that's when I was like, okay, I need to go to my computer right now and see what the average molecular weight of a base pair of DNA is. And so I did that, and I actually came up with the number 616 grams per mole. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a disappointment. But then I remembered about CRISPR technology, which is it's the newest DNA editing technology. That is just, it's just the amount of research that's gone into that, and since it's been discovered in 2012, has just been phenomenal, and it just increases every year. In fact, clinical trials involving the use of CRISPR to edit DNA have already begun.
Yeah,
So
we talked about that last time, and that was really amazing. Just for everybody, kind of bring us back up to speed on what CRISPR is. It's actually clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. Is that correct? So
right,
that's a
and
mouthful
that's
according to Wikipedia here.
right.
But bring us up to speed. What is CRISPR, and why is this so significant? I mean, it's really caught your attention. So maybe share with us why that is so amazing.
Well, there has been technology available to edit DNA before CRISPR, but CRISPR is the newest one, and it's actually the easiest and simplest and fastest way to edit DNA, and it just uses that Cas enzyme there and a strand of RNA. Part of the RNA actually binds to the Cas enzyme, and then the other half of the RNA, or however long you want the RNA to be, binds to the DNA where the DNA is to be cut. And you can also insert a piece of exogenous DNA into the cell or into the nucleus. And when that DNA, when the endogenous DNA is cut by this Cas enzyme, this exogenous DNA is then copied over that gap in the DNA where it was cut.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it's important because we can edit people's DNA, you know, while they're living. You know, you don't have to like clone DNA and put a whole genome in a cell. You can just edit the genome of a live organism.
Wow.
So it's pretty revolutionary.
So if, kind of what I've suggested, what you are also seeing from this idea of the DNA with the 666, then let's say the Antichrist, the beast, whatever you want to call him, if he were then to alter the DNA of living people, that is uh, a real possibility. But this is something they've been trying to do for a long time, isn't it? I mean, they've been trying to do genetic, um, what do you call it? Genetic therapy, right? For
Right.
now. So how is this now a game changer from before?
Well, it's just more accurate, it's faster and easier, and just to put it in layman's terms, it's just more feasible. Actually, it's previous DNA editing technology is just very clunky and hard to get into a cell. Um, Whereas this, you know, you just need this plasmid here on the left of your screen. You're showing this plasmid circular DNA. You just need to get that into the cell, and that can usually fit inside of a viral capsid,
Uh-huh.
which they can then use the viral capsid packaged with this circular DNA plasmid uh, to insert that plasmid into the cell. And once that plasmid is in the cell, your native cellular machinery will read that circular DNA plasmid, synthesize that Cas9 enzyme and that guide RNA,
Uh-huh.
as well as make a copy of that DNA that you want it to be inserted.
Okay.
And you know, it's just autopilot from there. It's
Wow.
it's really, you know, it's revolutionary. I mean, I don't know how else to
Wow.
put it, but
Yeah.
um,
It really is. So, okay, so you deliver this using a virus, all right? It's delivered by
yep,
virus. The virus then
right,
goes and attaches to the cell membrane, drops off this new DNA strand or this DNA plasmid, as we're looking at
right,
right here. The plasmid goes into the cell, goes into the nucleus of the cell,
uh huh,
and basically, what is it? I mean, inside the library of the cell are just the blueprints, isn't that right?
right. Well, you have your native DNA, your the DNA that makes you who you are. It goes in
That's right.
there
Yeah.
and it cuts it, and it knows where to cut it because of this guide RNA, this gRNA that you see inserting itself in between the two DNA strands. So the green guide
Okay.
RNA
Uh-huh.
matches up with the base with the nucleotides, those building blocks I was talking about,
Mm.
and
Okay. That's right
it
over here.
makes these base pairs. So the RNA pairs with your DNA, and at that point, the Cas9 enzyme actually cuts the DNA. And so once the DNA is cut, the cell goes to repair it. And and before the cell goes to repair it, actually, there can be another piece of DNA in there that kind of overlaps with across the gap in the DNA that was cut. And then your cellular machinery just simply copies in that DNA that was put in there
Uh-huh.
in place of where that cut is. So it's a really easy way to just add to your genome, take parts out of your genome. Um,
So, which part of this is actually artificial? I mean, I don't know enough to understand which part of this is artificial. Like, how does this virus that's delivering this DNA plasmid, how does it know to go in there and cut? I mean, that's what isn't clear for me.
It's all set. So the guide, so this white cloud that you see is the Cas9 enzyme.
Okay.
Okay, and
Okay.
it it is made in a way. So enzymes can have lots of different functionalities. They interact with all kinds of different molecules. There are enzymes that synthesize DNA. There are enzymes that methylate DNA. There are enzymes that recruit other enzymes to the DNA so that it can read the DNA and make mRNA, which is then so enzymes have many different functions in a cell, and they're not all related to DNA, of course. But
Okay.
this enzyme in particular is specialized, and it's actually a bacterial enzyme. It's natural. It's a natural enzyme, but it's not natural to humans. Uh, it is designed to cut DNA,
Okay.
and whether it's bacterial DNA or human DNA, it doesn't care.
So it's
What
a
it
it's a
cares,
tiny machine that God has already made, basically. I mean,
yeah,
we're just borrowing the parts that God's already made, right? This is
right,
a little power tool that God created a while ago, and we're like, hey, this is a cool power tool. Let's put it in here, and just kind of direct it a little bit, and it goes to work.
right. Well, naturally, it's used to cut up viral DNA, I believe, and also to incorporate some parts of the viral DNA in into the bacterial DNA, so then it can recognize a virus or viral DNA again if it comes around.
Uh-huh.
So it's a natural defense mechanism that the bacteria have basically against viruses.
I see.
But we have perverted it, to use it towards our own end and edit our
So and so it's going to deliver the payload, which is this foreign DNA.
right.
It then cuts the native DNA. It delivers the foreign RNA. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong here, and
It
then
uses the RNA actually
uh,
to so that guide RNA sits
yep.
inside of that Cas9 enzyme, that white cloud.
Okay. Uh-huh.
That is the Cas9 enzyme,
Yep.
and yeah, so that part of the RNA that you just pointed to, that loop, that's actually the part of the RNA that recognizes the enzyme. The other
Uh-huh.
part of the RNA that is inserted in between the two DNA strands is actually the part of the RNA that guides the enzyme to the place where it is supposed to cut the DNA.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So you can make this guide RNA whatever sequence you want. So you can cut anywhere in your whatever DNA sequence you want. It'll recognize it and cut at that spot.
Wow. Now, just to let people know, this is not science fiction. This is already on, this is boots on the ground kind of stuff that's already possible. This is happening. And I would suspect that probably most scientists have rather noble aspirations of what this can do. What do you think are some of the noble aspirations that scientists think about what we could do before we get into some of the more nefarious, dark stuff? So, what is it that they would like to, in an ideally, perfect world where we get to really help people? What do they see this doing as far as helping people?
So any genetic diseases like Huntington's or Parkinson's uh, can you can go in there and fix the gene that causes Huntington's disease,
Wow.
for instance. That would be a noble aspect of it. But
Uh-huh.
as far as like a more nefarious aspect, it can be used to perhaps just seemingly innocent, like change your eye color, incorporate animal DNA into human DNA, and to where you have chimeric beings.
Wow.
Uh,
Now, how long would it take for the transformation to take place? Let's say that the DNA goes in there, or this plasmid it goes in there. How long before you would actually have different color eyes, for example?
I'm not sure entirely. I can tell you that enzymes work very fast, and depending on the viral load that's initially injected into the body, the viruses can go in and transfect this DNA into every cell in the body pretty quickly. I don't, I'm not an immunologist. I'm not a virologist. And I'm not
Right.
even a geneticist.
Sure.
But if I had to guess, I would say within a day,
Wow.
or however long it takes to get rid of, your old proteins that encode for your eye, that make the color of your eyes. However long it takes for your body to make new proteins that make your eyes that
Okay.
color.
Uh-huh.
Naturally, that's how long it would take for the changes to take place.
Wow. It's interesting. I saw, I'm trying to think of the name of the movie. What was it called? It's called Splice. I think that's what it was called. This came out, I don't know, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, something like that, where these two genetic scientists were basically working on, animal human hybrids. They were able to create one, and it was this little, human animal kind of looking being, pretty weird looking. It was, sort of all nice and cute at the beginning, but then it grew into basically a young woman, for all, lack of a better word. Okay, this was a rather nice person, let's say, but then she came of age sexually, and then she became very, very aggressive, and then um, she was able to kind of transform herself into this um, I don't know, sort of sex goddess, if you will. And then after having mated with this particular guy, rather in a violent sort of way, kind of a rape, then she turned into basically like, then her whole gender changed and she became a demon. Now, I mean, obviously that's Hollywood, but what I found really interesting about that is, you know, their perspective of this whole thing, their imagination of where this would lead to, where when you have human animal hybridization, again, I understand it's fiction, but so often we see that fiction tends to somehow eventually kind of make its way into reality. I mean, what we're talking about, gene splicing, etc., used to be complete fiction, and yet now it's actually happening. The whole idea of, again, human animal chimeras, this was Dr. Moreau, right? The island of Dr. Moreau, and yet now we're actually doing it. And
Right.
so you just have to wonder, like, man, maybe there isn't something to that. Maybe there's something to, um, what they were thinking. And so, that just kind of had me thinking. I don't know, but what do you have any thoughts on that? Is there anything that kind of jumps out at you from that basic scenario?
I've seen the movie, and I know what you're talking
Okay.
about, and I'm not going to argue with you about it. I totally agree, and yeah, um, I mean, there's all kinds of crazy looking creatures that could result from changing our DNA. It is the base code for life. I mean,
Uh,
it's what the only difference, on the base level between you and a I don't know, like a tree even is just how your DNA is organized.
right. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of trees, there's a geneticist in Israel who believes that one day streetlights will be out of fashion, and they're basically going to just change the DNA in trees, etc.,
Uh-huh.
to emit a glow. And I thought that was pretty nuts, and yet this, so far as I remember, this particular researcher has come up with a website where you can go and put in whatever kind of combinations of DNA, etc., and then the company will then create this thing and then ship it to you. They'll freeze dry it, ship it to you, and there you go. So
I
It's
wonder how
pretty.
long that tree would last, though, with all the bugs eating it that are attracted to the light.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think what's happening is when we start messing with the source code, we think we're so clever. And I'm sure we'll have a few successes along the way. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think that everything's gonna fail, but I think that it'll just be a matter of time until somebody, just hits the wrong button, right? They go left instead of right, or they, hit the number two instead of number three or whatever. And then suddenly, you start having some really weird, strange concoctions, that we see about in Revelation chapter 9, where it says that the abyss is going to be opened up, and then you have these very strange looking locusts that come out of the abyss, and then you have these very strange and altogether different kind of horsemen, horses and men, or whatever these things are, but they appear to be some kind of a chimeric creature that are coming out of the abyss, and
Like a
then,
centaur.
yeah, like a centaur or something like that. And then what really struck me is it says that men for 5 months are going to be tormented, and they're going to seek death, but it's going to escape them. Now, again, if you really are intent on dying, you know, generally, most people that really want to kill themselves are able to do that, right? I mean, it doesn't take that much creativity to really do yourself in if that's what your heart is set on. And and yet here men will want to kill themselves, and yet they won't be able to. So again, what that says to me is that mankind has achieved, so to speak, some measure of success in getting that immortality, not real true immortality, but being able to not die, let's call it. And yet
That's
it's
really
gonna,
interesting.
yeah, and it's gonna
Yeah.
be really painful.
There's actually a researcher at the University of Florida that is studying jellyfish, and he's cut the brains out of these jellyfish multiple times. Like the same jellyfish, he cut the brains out 4 times, and the brain just grows back.
Oh,
Imagine if we could incorporate the DNA that from that jellyfish that enables that into us. Then you can imagine a scenario or of a person doing that, and they won't be able to kill themselves. It'll just regenerate their brain right after they try and kill themselves. Sure,
wow.
it sounds like science fiction, but if it happens in nature, then we can probably exploit it, and using this technology incorporate that coding into ourselves, and then
Uh-huh.
take on those abilities, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and again, I really want to give people credit because I think that probably, I don't know, 99.9% of all researchers, in my estimation, have really good aspirations. They have the right desires, but I think that they're doing things, somebody along the way is going to slip up. They're going to do the wrong thing, which I think the whole thing is wrong. But I'm just saying that, their desire is probably in the right place, that they want to help people. Okay. And yet, God has told us that we're not to do this, that everything is supposed to reproduce according to its own kind. And yet now it seems like we've really opened Pandora's box, that we have gotten to that place where we understand pretty well the source code, not perfectly, but I mean, just how many years ago people thought that most of your DNA was junk DNA. I mean, how stupid was that, right? But they're like, oh, it's mostly all junk, right? And as a creationist, I'm like, look, I don't understand a lot about DNA, but I know it's not mostly all junk. Okay, I know that much. Okay, and of course now they're like, oh, actually, all this DNA is really good for something. Just like all your vestigial organs they're discovering are really good for something. Your appendix really does something, right? And yet, so there's a lot of, I think, a lot of arrogance to some extent, thinking that, we've evolved this far, we can continue evolving. So how do you see that this philosophy of evolution plays into uh, man eventually making a mistake? In other words, because this idea that, hey, we've evolved this far over millions of years, all we're doing is simply helping our evolution to the next step. I mean, do you come across that sentiment among researchers?
Not personally, I haven't, but watching some of these TED Talks, it's really disturbing. They're even calling us, no longer are we Homo sapiens, we are Homo evolutus. We have control of our own destiny, our own evolutionary path, so they say. Yeah, it's pretty disturbing, and I don't even believe as a scientist that we know enough about genetics to even start messing with our genome. Uh, but yet we are. So
That's so true. We sure are. We sure are. Where do you think, again, just, based on the research you've been doing, the lectures you've been listening to, see people have, do you think they're going to be successful in the next couple of years? And if they do, what would the goal be? You don't just want to mix yourself with some random animal, but do you think it's really possible that you could augment your vision, or you could augment your strength, or you could augment, growing your brain back, or whatever it may be? Where do you see us headed next?
absolutely, it's the as far as vision and growing your brain back, I think that perhaps is a little ways off. But as far as strength is concerned, they've already done it in pigs using CRISPR, made them like super strong pigs. Like just this bag of muscles. So I think that's pretty easy, and I think we could probably do that today. But as far as vision is concerned, that's obviously a little bit more complex, and especially
Okay.
growing your brain back.
So, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So, if you could go back to that one image that you have of CRISPR and the DNA and the
Absolutely.
RNA,
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to
I'll
I just
just
want to
do that.
make this connection, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, but
There it is.
what do you think of that? That's the rod of Hermes, and
The rod of Hermes.
yeah.
You'll have to, or did you get your own? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, right. Okay, got it. Yes. Okay.
So does that not
Yeah, this this right there is a double helix, right? That's what it looks like.
the double helix with a rod inserted or RNA inserted with wings on it, like angel's wings? Like we're
Wow.
inserting angelic DNA into ours.
So, okay, you're talking about the triple DNA. Is that what you're referring to? The
No, I
double
mean, well,
triple
just if
helix?
you look at the the diagram that you have up,
Uh-huh.
right,
Okay.
and you have RNA being inserted in between the two DNA strands, then now that's only temporary, but it makes a lasting change on the DNA.
Oh,
So it's almost
interesting.
like, and mainstream archaeologists, mainstream historians, will say otherwise about this rod of Hermes symbol. Uh, but in fact, these intertwined serpents have been found. This symbol, not maybe not with the angel's wings, but with the rod and the intertwined serpents, has been found all over the world. Ancient artifacts all over the world. And I was actually watching Ancient Aliens the other day, like an older episode. And they were talking about decoding the cosmic egg, right? So all of these ancient artifacts also have an egg, and in some cases, an egg with a double helix on it or intertwined serpents on it. And they actually postulated correctly, I believe, that at some point in our history, what they call extraterrestrials manipulated human DNA and, well, what we would
Wow.
call angels, right? And this is
Uh-huh.
that symbol that depicts that event. So
Huh. So this is a symbol of angels, perhaps being the angel's wings. The double helix is the two snakes, and then that rod down the middle would be the insertion of the angelic DNA, which is of course attached to the angel wings, is then inserted into the middle. Uh, that's the basic understanding of this symbol. Is that what you're kind of suggesting?
The actual, well, yeah, to me, and some, other, what you call ancient alien theorists, or these
Right.
guys would say. But archaeologists, historians, mainstream historians will argue otherwise, of course,
Of course,
because
sure.
they cannot get it through their heads that somehow we had knowledge of DNA and even its structure in
Yeah.
antediluvian times.
Well, it's amazing when you go back to the Bible and you start taking a look at what was happening there in Genesis chapter 6. I mean, it's really unfortunate when people do not, they don't keep the whole story of the Bible in there, and they start saying, well, that was just talking about the sons of Seth and all that nonsense. But again, Genesis chapter 6, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because there's a guy right now in sort of my YouTube comment section. He thinks I'm absolutely nuts that I think that Genesis chapter 6 is talking about anything other than the sons of Seth. And of course, I think he's nuts because the Bible clearly does not say the sons of Seth. It talks about these aliens, or angels, right, that came and they mated with women. I mean, it says there were giants on the earth in those days. If you look at that in the Hebrew, it says the word Nephilim. And I mean, it's hard to get around that, right? So, and also afterward, when the sons of God, and then of course I show, and many other researchers do as well, that the sons of God is talking about angelic beings. They came into the daughters of men. That's the daughters of Adam. Okay, so obviously these are females who belong to the race of Adam, okay, versus this race of sons who belong to the race of God, whatever, So in other words, they're of a different nature, they're angels, and they bore children, right? So these are the mighty men of old. And then it says, that of course their thoughts were always wicked, right? We get that. And then it says that the all earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. All right, so everything, and it goes on to say, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Right, so that right there, all flesh. We're not just talking about just being, mean to each other, and they're not, observing what God has said to do, or they're murdering each other. What we're talking about, it says all flesh had corrupted their way. So that means, even the lizards and the lions and, all the animals somehow had been polluted. I mean, there's something to that. If you look
Right.
at the Dead Sea Scrolls, it talks about, in Qumran, I believe it's cave number 4, if I'm correct, um, it talks about how these angels came and they made some kind of monsters, So again, there's some corroboration to what the Bible is saying, that somehow the life forms back then were corrupted. And to me, that seems to be the biggest reason that God had to destroy the world. I mean, we're talking about the God of love, of grace, the God who loves his creation, and yet he's heartbroken over what is happening. And so it's so bad. And there are potentially billions of people on the planet at this time. But it's so bad that he has to destroy it, everybody, in a flood. I mean, I think we just don't really take time to appreciate the weight of what really happened back there. Just how many people were involved and how difficult this was for God to do. Because, God does not like to destroy things, especially his own creation. I mean, that would be like you have kids and you're just like, I'm sorry, I got to put you down. I
Yeah.
mean, you've gone so far, you're so far gone, there's no saving you.
Right.
There's something to that. So again, I think we're in agreement here that your DNA really seems to be the issue. And just kind of bringing it back, what you're talking about with the 666, or now you did mention something that you also found another number, 616,
Right.
And you found that also in some other texts. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so if you actually so that part of Revelation 13:18, there have been a number of uh, papyrus, papyri,
Papyri.
pieces of papyrus that have been discovered recently. Actually,
Sure.
not recently. In most famous case, papyrus number 115 was discovered, and part of it uh, is Revelation 13:18, and it has the number of the beast as 616,
Uh-huh.
not 666.
Okay. Okay.
And according to the INTF translation, or the transcription of the INTF, the manuscript actually read 666 or 616.
Huh. It said, now does it actually say, it says either or? Because
Yes.
that's pretty interesting. I'm just trying to get us a little something that we can take a look at here. But that is very interesting. Now, um, yeah, I mean that's that's pretty fascinating. So
And
let's
so
see
that's
here.
the actual 616 is the first number I came across, and that's the average molecular weight of a base pair of DNA in its polymerized ionized form, which is its natural form.
Okay.
The average molecular weight of a base pair is 616
Uh-huh.
grams per mole.
Okay.
Now, when you throw RNA in the mix and you just take the nucleotides themselves, then you get 666 as the average molecular weight of
Wow.
a base pair of RNA and DNA.
So both of them work out. That's what's pretty cool here. I mean, either way, 616 or 666, either one of those actually fits the bill, what you're saying.
Right.
Wow. This is wild, man. I mean, when you start to think about how the Bible, certainly the book of Revelation written 2000 years ago, nobody, as far as we know, nobody had any clue about DNA and all this stuff. I mean, God did, of course, but the average human had really no concept of what's going on here. And yet we seem to really be putting together some clues. We must be getting close to the end. We're getting close to that place where the DNA of man can be changed, it can be manipulated. And again, looking at Revelation 13, when you consider that this false prophet is going to give life to the beast. Now, let me ask you about that. It seems to be some kind of an android, robot, whatever you want to call it. But then again, it seems to go beyond that, right? Because 20, 30 years ago, we would have thought, well, that's just talking about some kind of a robot or something. But nowadays, we're like, well, maybe there's something more. Maybe this is going to be some kind of a machine, whatever, that is going to have living tissue and it can really actually breathe. As it says that he gave breath, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast,
Yeah.
that the
And
image of the beast should both speak and cause as many who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed.
a robot doesn't breathe.
Right. A robot has no need to breathe, right? I mean, that's the whole point. And so, what we might have kind of been looking at the whole robot scenario to kind of fit the bill there. I mean, it could be very different, and rather than kind of building it from ground zero, maybe they're going to use existing parts, right? Basically, living tissues, and then through some kind of a chimeric process using this CRISPR technology to then create some kind of a Frankenstein type of creature that will literally have breath. It will have some kind of cognizance, right? It's going to be able to think. It's going to be able to act, to enforce and execute. And now it doesn't seem to have a soul, because when everybody gets killed, you don't hear about the image of the beast being thrown into the lake of fire. It's just the Antichrist, the false prophet, and then later comes Satan. So, you know, that I find very interesting. But again, it really seems to be some kind of a living, breathing, conscious being that is brought into existence. And wow, I mean, the CRISPR technology, I think, just answers so many amazing things.
Yeah, I think the image of the beast will actually be incorporated into our DNA. So some of the DNA of the first beast will be incorporated into our DNA. And in that
Hmm.
way, we will also be giving life and breath to the image of the beast.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about synthetic biology. Synthetic biology is where you create the code in a computer. They can then print it with a DNA printer. They can use sugar derived from corn, quite possibly, as the building blocks, if you will, and or the nucleic acids, and then of course, barring that, before you actually print it, you can literally email this to somebody, and then they could print it on their DNA printer. What have you heard about that? Do you know where that technology is right now? Uh,
Oh, that technology is very accessible to anyone. I mean, it's actually not even that expensive or um, prohibitive, and quite easy to use. It just you put in a sequence, a DNA sequence consisting of, again, those four letters A, T, G, and C that I spoke of, that make up the basic building blocks of DNA. And this machine actually, it has four bottles, um, that you can, each one contains a solution uh, of one of the four letters, right? One of the four
right.
molecules that make up DNA. Yeah. So, and then and it also
It's
has
like
a couple of
3D.
other.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
3D printing for DNA, basically.
yeah. I mean, it's a little. Yeah, I mean,
Looks.
it's really simple and really
Yeah.
fast and robust and cheap now and easy to use. It's not even, yeah, it's not even on the cutting edge anymore. It's it's just it's like ancient technology.
It's like boring already. You're like, oh, whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, this is amazing. Again, I wrote my book a couple years ago, and the technology is changing so quickly that I mean, it's really amazing. So again, I mean, it's exciting but scary at the same time, right? Where it is, again, the scenario that I see happening is that Satan basically gives his code, which is of course non-material. He gives his code to the person of his choosing, called the Antichrist. That person then takes it, puts it into the computer, and then it spits it out as he prints it, right? He then prints it and then injects it into himself using the virus, the CRISPR technology. He's then transformed, and then I see him taking his new DNA and replicating that, and then sending that out to the masses via email. All right, to maybe major centers, and then those centers could print the DNA, inject it into a virus, and then the virus is maybe delivered via injection, or that's kind of the scenario that I see. I mean, is that something that sounds legitimate, or is this kind
Yeah,
of
I
like
mean,
old technology? This is so boring.
I could see, like your local Walgreens having a DNA printer, and not only does it print DNA, but it actually loads it into a viral capsid for you, and like you just order it on your smartphone and go to your local Walgreens and pick up a syringe filled with these viral capsids loaded with this DNA that you printed. Uh,
That's funny. Half off, Mark of the Beast. Get yours today.
sure.
Hey, do you got a coupon for this? That'd be kind of funny.
And I mean,
You
that
know.
could happen. That could be done today. I don't see why it couldn't be done today.
Oh.
We have the technology, right? So,
Well, yeah. That's amazing. That is just phenomenal. I mean, wow. So yeah, I mean, again, when this thing actually does happen, it can happen so quickly. The technology is in place. Again, we both agree that the DNA aspect, it just answers so many more questions than, putting a chip on your back of your hand and now you can buy and sell faster. You know, people have said, well, what about, the number, and what about, buying and selling? My take on it, and then please share me what you think, but my take is that the penalty for not getting the transformation is that you will be barred from buying and selling, but you don't get the thing so that you can buy and sell faster. I mean, look, frankly, when I stick my card in the thing at the store and I take it out, I mean, that's really fast, right? I mean, it's self-service nowadays. I go, boop, and I'm out in a couple of seconds. Just so that I'm not going to get a chip in my hand so I can be out there in half of that time. I mean, it's already fast. So there's got to be a bigger incentive. And what I think the incentive is, and tell me if you would agree with this, but I think what the incentive is that we all want to become Captain America, essentially. We would love to have that transformation. So, if somebody comes along and says, look, we have CRISPR technology, we have all this technology that can do this, and we can now deliver to you this, formula, right? The Antichrist formula, the Mark of the Beast formula, whatever. They don't call it that, of course. But when you take this, you're then transformed. You will then have, incredible eyesight. You'll have, you will live to be 300 years old or something like that. And people are like, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. I don't have to go to the gym anymore. I can just be strong, right? I think that kind of stuff is what is going to really encourage people to do that. And then the people that refuse to do it, they will be like the people that won't get vaccinated nowadays because, and this is what's happening is that, children around the country that are not vaccinated because their parents have a reason against it are now being barred from school. And, so, again, what I would suggest is that the reason that people get it is so that they can have the augmented reality. And the reason that you will not be able to buy and sell is because you are not willing to take this. And so that's the penalty for not doing it. That's just kind of a added measure to make sure that everybody takes it.
Yeah, to me, it's like if you don't get if you don't get this DNA upgrade from Satan, then you're gonna become a burden on society because you're gonna get sick all the time and you're gonna be weak and slow, and you're just not gonna be a productive member of society. You won't be able to hold a job because everyone that holds a job is like superhuman, right? They have this crazy DNA upgrade that makes them a way better employee than you'll ever be without the mark, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's how I see it. It's almost
yeah.
like someone who is a smoker can't get health insurance, right? Or if they get lung cancer, it's not covered by their health insurance because they smoke cigarettes. It's
Yeah.
the same kind of deal. Like if you don't get the mark of the beast, you're basically a smoker. You're a burden on society. You can't get health care. You can't get a job just because you're inferior.
Right. Danny DeVito came out with a movie a couple years ago. He directed it. It's called Gattaca, and the whole premise of the movie. I mean, this came back out in 1997. Talk
Yep.
about it being ahead of its time. Essentially, Gattaca again, 1997. That was like ages ago, right? And but again, a movie that was ahead of its time. And in order to be part of the future society, you had to basically be born in a test tube, so to speak. And if you were not of that test tube quality, and it was your DNA that was tested every time you went to work, they would take prick your finger, they would see that it's really you, and that's how you got your job. Was all based on your DNA. It wasn't based on how smart you were. You married people not based on whether you thought they were amazing. You just gave them a little sample of your hair. They checked it out, like, oh yeah, you'd be a great person to marry because you have all these amazing qualities. And that's the kind of thing, is that it was all about the DNA. And if you didn't have the right DNA, you were out. And so this one guy he was sort of born the old fashioned way, right? He was conceived the old fashioned way. And so he did not have the designer DNA, and he was an outcast, but he was incredibly intelligent. And so he had to then go through all these different hoops in order to blend into society and to get ahead, and he had to really kind of cheat the system. But of course, it was very clever how he did it. And that's what it sounds like our future is coming, is that it's essentially a version of Gattaca, but instead of having just designer DNA, you're actually going to have that satanic upgrade, so to speak, right? And
Right.
and if you don't get that, then you are not only an outcast, but now you're actually seen as being dangerous, because now there's the herd mentality. And here's a guy that, not only is he dangerous to us health wise, but there's something wrong with his, psychologically, because why would he not want to get this, right?
Right.
And so he then has to be exterminated because he's a danger to everybody.
Right. Yeah. They would just see someone without this DNA change as weak, just a burden to society. Like, so that's how I see that. And another point in Gattaca, and I made this point the last episode we did together. In Gattaca, the guy, when he checks into work, he just pricks his finger, and you mentioned that, and it reads his DNA very quickly. And I think that we could also, if we're not at that point right now, we will be there soon, where we can use DNA sequencing technology to sequence someone's DNA very quickly, even in like a store when you go to check out. Uh, just take a finger prick or something instead of a credit card.
Wow.
But either
Well,
way,
yeah.
it's possible that you can be prevented from buying or selling.
Yeah. And that's kind of the bottom line. Now, do you think, let's talk about the thing that's going to be on your forehead or your hand. I mean, there is going to be some kind of a physical mark, right? There's definitely a physical mark. Do you think, again, we're just hypothesizing as far as I can see, but um, if you were to then have this hybridization process, do you think that that could leave some kind of mark, or could that actually be encoded into the mix so that something will come out on the back of your hand or on your forehead, just sort of as a proof of purchase?
I think anything's possible if. Mm,
We know how people, when people get the shot, you get the shot for immunization, and then it often will leave a mark
like the
on your
polio
arm.
vaccine.
Yeah, the polio vaccine, and you can tell who's had the mark, who's had the shot, who hasn't, right?
Right.
And because there's that little sphere, or a little whatever circle on their arm. So could it? I'm just kind of thinking maybe it's like the after, the residue, like this little thing just kind of naturally grows out from your hand or your head, and it's just like, oh yeah, well, everyone who gets this transformation, that just happens. That's just a natural side effect from this transformation. But of course, it's worth it because you get all these incredible benefits.
Right. It could be. It could be. Again, I don't know if this is going to be entirely a terrestrially derived technology. I think that there's going to be a supernatural intervention where these extraterrestrials, right? These
Uh-huh.
fallen angels who are, by the way, supposedly this is the time, according to the Book of Enoch, that they're being released from their chains, but they're going to, enlighten us, so to speak, at, uh, in regards to all the secrets of DNA and how we can utilize it and manipulate it. And they're so intelligent. They know so much about DNA that they could probably make it to where when you get this DNA change, yeah, it makes a mark on your forehead or on your hand. I don't see why not.
Wow.
People have
Yeah.
birthmarks and um, leopards have spots, so I don't see why. I mean, there's got to be
Uh,
some piece of
yeah.
DNA that you could to encode for something like that. Sure,
Yeah.
some kind
And
of.
it, again, my hunch, it's just purely a hunch that this is something that sort of happens. It's not necessarily planned, but it happens. But then it happens to everybody, and then that becomes really a mark of pride. You're like, hey, I got it. It becomes very obvious who has undergone the transformation and who hasn't. And in case there's any doubt, you're like, look, it's right here, I got it, or it's right here. And then there's no question that you actually got
Right.
the transformation, because this thing just sort of comes out as a consequence of going through this transformation. Well, again, you have really just enlightened us on where the technology is, on the rapidity that it is moving, and some of the things that just even a couple years ago, just 3-4 years ago, things were like, well, maybe this is going to happen, and now you're almost scoffing at it, like, well, that's old technology, right? So I mean, that's kind of exciting that it seems that so far it seems that the research is kind of going in the right direction. But this also needs to be a reminder to the rest of us that we've got to keep our eyes open. We need to be awake. We need to see, what's going on. I want to stress this, though, that even though I do believe, and I think Tyler would agree, that it's all going to have a very bad ending, I would suggest that most of the scientists don't have any kind of nefarious plans. They're not trying to take over the world and create the mark of the beast. They're trying to help people, okay? They're trying to help people. The trouble is when we don't do what God tells us to do, that even though those good intentions that we have can end very, very badly, right? So that's why everything is to reproduce according to its own kind. And if you think there is no God, if you think that we got here by chance, by evolution, then of course you're going to then try to evolve to the next level. You're going to try to help evolution do its next thing. It's going to seem very natural. It's going to just be the natural thing to do, right? But if you believe in God, you're like, wait a second, I'm going to leave DNA and the manipulation of that DNA up to God, because He actually knows the source code. He wrote it, He created it, and we should leave it in His sphere. Well, again, Tyler, I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us the things that you've discovered, and we really appreciate that. And we just want to say thank you for being here to help us understand better about DNA, CRISPR technology, and where the mark of the beast just might be coming and going. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I'm just happy to get the word out there. I don't want anybody manipulating their DNA and thinking that it's just some kind of flippant thing to do.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. Everyone, stay in the Word. And the Word of God is what's going to be there to protect us, to guide us. It's like guardrails, it keeps us on the path, right? So just keep reading God's Word. Do what God says. Don't do what God doesn't say, right? So just be careful to do that. And, the cool thing is that God has an amazing body ready for us. These bodies wear out. Don't try to keep this one going forever, okay? Get your 70 or 80 or 90 years, whatever, the Lord provides for you. And after that, just He's got a new model wait for you. So that's the good news. So thank you so much. Everyone, stay in the Word. Until next time, God bless.